Hi everyone, and welcome to Astrology Sphere. In this video I'm going to be doing your forecast for the new moon in Pisces, which happens on the 23rd of February, depending of course on where you are in the world. So in many ways this new moon won't be as dramatic as the supermoon in Leo, but I don't think it'll be any less magical, and the reason that I say that is that we'll be at the height of Pisces season, and we'll be coming off the tail of the Jupiter-Neptune sextile, which happened on the 20th of February. Now this aspect was really magical in many ways, probably our most dreamy aspect of the year so far, and together with the Mars-Uranus sextile that will be happening at the new moon, I think this will give us a much needed boost of optimism and a jolt of electricity that will help to propel us forward through Pisces season and Mercury retrograde season towards the spring equinox, which marks the beginning of the astrological new year. So the next 2 weeks are probably best spent laying the groundwork, or kind of doing the internal preparation for what's to come in March. And I think really what we're doing is we're fine-tuning our intuition and recalibrating our inner GPS so that we know we've kind of corrected any doubts, or we've done course corrections basically over the Pisces season and Mercury retrograde season, and we're ready to go when it comes to the equinox, which is really when it's time to take action in many respects. So this is also a time when we are processing a lot of the losses and grief of things closing out, cycles closing out in January, and I think it's only natural for us to want to slow down, turn inward, and do a little bit of soul searching. But I think the good news is that thanks to Uranus, this particular new moon cycle will allow us to see things, the past in particular, in a new light. You know, when we have Mercury retrogrades, particularly in water signs, there's always the danger that we can be hoovered back or kind of sucked back into old patterns, cycles, relationships, ways of thinking, and so on. But I think with this, with Mars kind of in the mix and Uranus being such a forward-looking planet, I think we're really being kind of given that extra boost of resolve to keep going, even though Pisces season can sometimes drag us into a bit of a funk and make us a little bit apathetic. So that's really good news. The other good news is that the luminaries will be making an aspect to Chiron and Black Moon Lilith, and that gives us an opportunity to solve some of the sort of do some conflict resolution, heal some of the patterns in relationships when it comes to conflict. And that's something I'm going to get into in more depth in my extended forecast, which I do for members of my website, as well as you know, looking at the lunar phases in relation to each individual zodiac sign. So if that's something that you're interested in, then perhaps consider subscribing. Just go to my website at astrologysphere.com/subscribe and sign up. It's free, and I don't spam anyone or sell details, so you know, it might be worth your while to become a member. So that being said, I think it's time to dive into the forecast, and I'm wishing you a wonderful 2 weeks during this particular new moon phase. So without further ado, let's get into this new moon forecast. So as I said in my introduction, this new moon comes at the height of Pisces season, so it's really going to sort of emphasize those themes over the next 2 weeks. So some key ones to bear in mind and to try and work with include that of surrender, release, and forgiveness. I think since January, and even since the supermoon in Leo, many of us have been doing some internal processing, perhaps after having let go of certain situations, people, relationships, and so on. And you know, there's a whole kind of grieving process that goes on you know, behind the scenes. So even though we might have physically walked away, that doesn't mean that we've completely processed things yet emotionally. So it's natural for us to be going through those phases of denial, anger, you know, bargaining, and acceptance. And I think now that we're coming into the Pisces season, this is all about the kind of forgiveness and acceptance. Then another big Pisces theme is that of having faith in the unseen, and I think that this is kind of the next step in that particular process. You know, if you have kind of let go of a certain situation and walked into the unknown, it can be quite daunting to keep going when there doesn't seem to be anything kind of appearing on the horizon to replace that situation yet. And I think this is where we have to have faith that things will start to manifest and appear at the spring equinox. But right now, things are going on in the energetic sphere, you know, in the inner world. That there's a process to manifesting too, and that, you know, we just have to have faith and keep going, even though we're walking into the unknown. The other one that I think is going to be emphasized right now is also about embracing your intuition and imagination. Again, I think we are going within, particularly during Mercury retrograde season, we're kind of going within and we're learning to tell the difference between those messages that come up that are born from fear and perhaps worry and anxiety on the one hand, and then those that are from our higher selves, from our guides, from spirit, and so on. And I always like to think about the poem Desiderata by Max Ehrmann, where he says, "Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness." And I think, you know, during Pisces season, particularly with Mercury retrograde happening, there is the danger that we can kind of slump into a bit of apathy, a bit of hopelessness, lose hope, you know, kind of feel like giving up, or, you know, worse, being sucked back into old habits and behavior because, you know, after all, this is Hoover season. So the thing to do now is really, you know, work on recalibrating your inner compass so that you know where you're going come March, when the astrological year gets underway, and you can take action. The final theme that I think we will also see really kind of being emphasized over the next 2 weeks is that of sensing how we're connected. You know, Pisces is very much a sign of feeling, of kind of oceanic connectedness, in the sense of, you know, being aware of being part of something bigger. And you know, they're not terribly good at boundaries, but then on the other hand, this is because they're so empathetic and kind of able to see how everything is connected to everything else. And this is part of why they're so compassionate. They don't really judge, because they understand that there's no difference between themselves and other people, really. And so we can use this in a positive way, in the sense of, you know, being detached. That's what the new moon in Aquarius was trying to sort of teach us. That's what Aquarius season was all about, is kind of detaching from attachment, but at the same time also cultivating our compassion, our forgiveness, our kindness, and just helping people, you know, kind of where we can, without necessarily violating our own needs or compromising our boundaries. So those are really positive ways to work with this energy over the next 2 weeks. So here's the astrological chart for this Pisces new moon. Now, as you can see, there's a couple of things going on. First of all, we've got the Sun and the Moon right next to Mercury, and Mercury in turn is quite close to Neptune. So you can see that there's quite a lot of this Piscean energy going on. We've got 4 planets essentially in Pisces. And so that's really going to kind of, you know, enhance the Piscean energy that we were talking about, particularly Neptune, which is the ruler of Pisces. And I think Neptune, in this case, will inject a little bit of magical energy into the next 2 weeks, thanks to its sextile to Jupiter, which happens on the 20th of February, so just before this particular new moon. But of course, because these are slow-moving planets, this aspect will, you know, last for quite a while. And what we're doing with that is that we are correcting, we're course correcting after the mistakes that we made in 2019 at the Jupiter-Neptune squares, which happened in mid-January, mid-June, and again in September, close to the equinox. So this is really about integrating lessons, taking the nuggets from the mistakes that we made in the past, and using them to make better decisions going forward. Then the other thing to say about this particular chart is that we've got the Sun and the Moon sextile to Mars and to Uranus, and that's because Mars and Uranus will be making a sextile or a trine to each other rather, on Friday the 21st of February. And that again is giving us, as I said in the introduction, that boost of resolve and motivation to keep going with our goals and resolutions from the new year and from January, even though as yet we're not seeing any signs that our hard work is paying off. And then the other thing to take note of is that Uranus itself will be making that Mars will be next to, so Uranus is making a trine to Mars, which is next to the South Node, and of course the lunar nodes are where the paths of the Sun and the Moon cross each other. So this also figures into any particular lunar phase or cycle. And so what we're really looking at here is a release of ways of behaving that are perhaps not necessarily to our benefit, or that don't help situations. So, conflict, the way that we express aggression, and that's something that came up previously, I think during the Aquarius new moon, where we looked at Chiron and Lilith, and how passive aggressive behavior can sometimes cause problems in relationships if we're not willing to own our anger and to sort of talk to people, if we feel that they're hurting us, or that certain behavior is not cool. And I think if we look at this, Mars is square to Chiron and Lilith in the at the time of this particular new moon. And so I think that these issues are going to be raised again, and that's something that I'm going to get into in more depth in my extended forecast for members. So those are kind of the main energy signatures that are kind of going on at this particular new moon. As I said, I'm going to get into things a little bit more in depth in my extended reading, so if that's something you're interested in in hearing about, maybe you want to learn astrology, then consider going to my website and subscribing, and you'll get access to the extended forecast there. So this particular new moon occurs on the 5th degree of Pisces, and the SABIAN symbol for this is a church bazaar. Now, on the face of it, that doesn't really sort of mean a whole lot. I mean, obviously, there's the clear link between, kind of fundraising, churches, and kind of doing philanthropic work, charitable kind of endeavors, and so on. But if we look at Linda Hill's SABIAN Oracle and the keywords that she gives for that, we can see some of the issues that I talked about earlier kind of coming out. So first of all, we've got overcoming loneliness and alienation. And, I think something that a lot of people are becoming aware of, especially after Aquarius season, is how social media can often make people feel more alienated than connected. And that has a lot to do with the way that it's kind of set up to actually increase FOMO, make people feel that they have to kind of window dress their lives. It also encourages sort of superficiality, and it makes people feel that they can't really be honest about how they're feeling, because nobody wants to hear about, I'm feeling depressed or whatever. So I think that this is likely to be a big issue kind of right now, and so it's something that I think that people like Tristan Harris of the Center for Humane Technology is trying to address. And so it might be something that comes up in your own sphere. You might want to consider how you use social media, in a way that can perhaps help to, pay it forward, foster kindness, help support somebody going through a difficult time, and so on, rather than simply being a kind of shadow entertainment. So that's one way that this SABIAN symbol could work. The other is, of course, just simple kindness, of helping out community, because of course Pisces is all about the collective. So it may be kind of offering your services or skills to help others who are in need in some way, and learning to do that with compassion and not resentment. So that's another way that this might kind of come up for people. I'll just leave this up, and you can have a little read and see if any of these keywords kind of jump out for you, or kind of jog your memory. So that's kind of it for the mini forecast. As I said, if you'd like to subscribe to our website, I do an extended forecast that goes out with my newsletter twice a month. and I get a bit more in depth into the astrology of whatever the moon phase or eclipse is that's going on, and look at how it's can potentially affect each individual zodiac sign, as well as go into a bit more depth about certain topics that seem to be kind of prevalent at the time. So if that's something that interests you, if you're keen on learning more about astrology, then it might be something that you would benefit from. So have a look at my website. You can see my privacy policy, and it would be great to have you as a member if it's something that you feel that you'd like to do. Right, that's kind of it. All the best for the next 2 weeks, and I'll see you at the full moon forecast in a couple of weeks.